something strange is happening with Bitcoin. If you would have told me a year ago that 40 plus companies adopted Bitcoin as a treasury asset, that the US would approve a Bitcoin strategic reserve, every major institution would be buying Bitcoin through ETFs, only for Bitcoin to underperform the McDonald's stock, I would have called you crazy. So what the hell is happening? We started 2025 with a Bitcoin 100K party. Everyone was calling for 150K, 200K, even 500K by the end of the year.
It's going to be a fight for 200K.
Above 200K, 300K,
100 million K.
But here's what actually happened. Bitcoin did 1%. 1%. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 up 20%. Gold up 60%. Build-A-Bear is up 70%.
I mean, I think Bitcoin is kind of its own beast now, and it will ultimately become decoupled from the NASDAQ. There's a lot of noise. You know, Bitcoin up, Bitcoin down. I mean, we were at a record high less than a month ago, or just about a month ago, and now we're, at 105 or 106. So, the way this thing trades is kind of like a wild animal, and you can't really predict it. And I don't think it's ultimately going to be correlated to risk assets. I think it's going to be its own entity, and it's going to trade based on sound money principles. The one conclusion I do draw is that I think very strong probability that in the next year it's going to go up a lot.
Here's what's even weirder. The Bitcoin ETFs are seeing record inflows. Hash rate is at an all-time high. Everything that was supposed to drive the price up happened, and yet nothing. The community is demoralized. The fear and greed index is where it was at when FTX was collapsing. Everyone's asking, is Bitcoin broken? But what if everyone is looking at this completely wrong? And what if the spring is coiling for a move that nobody can see coming?
This adoption cycle looks to me very much like similar other ones that have occurred before. In other words, we're just consolidating at a higher level. We're over 100,000, which is a really good number. If you look at all the stuff that's happened in the last year, it's really been rather stunning. I mean, the inflows into the ETFs, the endorsement of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, Genius Act, Clarity Act soon to come. These are all very positive things that, don't always necessarily get reflected immediately in the price, but at some point after this consolidation, it's going to take off.
There's a theory that's been circulating amongst the smartest analysts in the space. Bitcoin is having its IPO moment. I can hear you. What the heck is an IPO? I had the same question too, but let me explain. Before a company goes public, the founders and investors, they own all the shares. An IPO is an initial public offering. It's literally just the process of taking that private company and opening it up for public investors for the first time. So when a company goes public, the early investors, the ones who believed in the company when nobody else did, can finally cash out. The founders who mortgaged their house, the VCs who took the risk, the employees who worked for equity. So as these huge holders sell some of their position in a market with way more demand than they ever had, the stock goes through a period called consolidation. And during that consolidation period, the stock goes sideways. Even when everything else is rallying, Bitcoin never had a traditional IPO. But the OGs who mined in 2010, who bought at $10, $100, $1,000, they've been sitting on generational wealth with nowhere to go. Moving to sell large amounts on an exchange would cause the price to spill way too fast, or even risk getting your funds Mt. Goxed. Until now, for the first time ever, Bitcoin has the liquidity infrastructure to let these massive holders sell without affecting the market.
I mean, they say that there are a lot of OG sellers, and that may be the case. I also think that liquidity is kind of getting tight. We see that in the Fed and what's going on in the repo markets and so forth. So Bitcoin does have a liquidity component to it. Even though it's sound money, it also tends to trade based on how much the new money is flowing in. And we saw this as I say, we saw this back in 2019 to 2020, where they printed a lot of money. Bitcoin kind of sat there for a while, then it took off. It went from 10 to 60, very, very quickly. And I think that's what's going to happen here.
Think about the psychology here. You bought Bitcoin at 100K. You held through Mt. Gox, through China bans, through mainstream media calling it a scam for decades. You believed in it when nobody else did. And now you're sitting on millions, maybe even hundreds of millions. Your kids, they're going to college, you're approaching retirement, you want to diversify. And for the first time, you can actually exit your position without destroying the market. Heck, move to Bitcoin Beach and find inner peace for the first time in 17 years. That's what winning looks like.
You want to have a big, deep market, and that's what we're developing. We're getting more and more buyers, across a larger spectrum, and so it's the process of it going from, weak hands to strong hands. So I've been around this thing since 2014, and I've seen big drawdowns, and this is a drawdown for ants.
I can already hear you. Oh my God, are OG selling? This must be really bad for Bitcoin. Relax, it's actually the opposite. When Bitcoin was held by a few thousand early adapters, the market was fragile. One person's decision to sell could crash the price. The holder base was tiny and fragile like this. But as ownership distributes, as millions of investors hold smaller positions rather than a few thousand holding massive ones, the market becomes structurally more stable. If 100 people own 50% of the entire supply, and one person sells, that's 0.5% of the entire Bitcoin supply hitting the market. That moves prices. But if 1 million people own the entire 50% of the supply and 10,000 decide to sell, that's still 0.5% of the entire supply, but spread across thousands of prices, thousands of transactions, different venues over time. The impact gets diffused. That's exactly what happened to Amazon after its IPO, and Google and Facebook. Ownership transferred from early pioneers to institutions.
Eventually, everyone's going to own Bitcoin. Everybody. And right now, maybe less than 5% of the world, but a small percentage of people own Bitcoin. And so what you're going to see is it's just going to become a normal thing that you invest in. You just buy Bitcoin. And that will make it much more stable. And it'll lead to smaller drawdowns and just a more steady progression to higher valuation.
Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The wild 10x years, they're probably behind us. But those awful 80% multi-year drawdowns, they'll probably moderate to 40, then 30%. Bitcoin is becoming boring, and that's exactly what it needs to become to reach its full potential. Because boring means stable, and stable means institutions can allocate real capital, and stable means Bitcoin can be used as a currency.
The great thing about this asset is you don't have to watch it. You can just buy it and forget it. Come back and check in 6 months. A very important thing that once you've been a long-term Bitcoiner, what you start to realize is that time preference is a real thing. And so patience is a real thing. And so you're right, you've got the right asset. Just sit tight and talk to me in 2 years. You'll be really glad you did.
Here's the thing about the distribution phase. As Bitcoin moves from concentrated early holders to millions of new owners, there's something critical everyone needs to know. Each Bitcoin transfer from concentrated hands to distributed hands makes the network more resilient. And the distributed hands, that's us, the ones who value freedom and control of our own money. But here's the catch. It doesn't matter if you bought Bitcoin at $100 or at $100,000. If you don't control your own keys, you don't control your money. During this IPO moment, as billions of dollars move around, exchanges are the one actually holding on to most of people's Bitcoin. And that's the problem. Because if anything happens to an exchange, a hack, a bankruptcy, government seizure, your Bitcoin is gone. So in less than 60 seconds, I'm gonna show you a mini crash course on how to never lose your Bitcoin again. This is a Blockstream Jade Plus. It is the easiest hardware wallet I've ever used, probably because it's designed by Adam Back, the only guy cited in the Bitcoin white paper. The Jade Plus is 100% open source, which means you can verify the code. And it's designed with features like a camera, a larger screen, and multiple connection modes that make your Bitcoin completely secure from any exchange or rug pull ever again. Discount code, I got you. Use code EXIT for 10% off. And if you pick it up before Black Friday, you'll get an extra 21% off. And if you need something that goes even a step further to secure your own Bitcoin or your family's inheritance Bitcoin, I got you. That's where Casa comes in. Casa creates quantum-proof
multi-signature vaults that secure your Bitcoin long-term and sets up trustlessly to distribute your Bitcoin to any family member in case of an emergency. I use Casa myself because I'm not saving it for me. I'm building generational wealth to last decades. And if you're curious, you can sign up for their free guide on how to set it up yourself and maybe even store your Bitcoin safer than Michael Saylor.
The link is down in the description.
So here's what I think is happening. Bitcoin isn't broken. The 4-year cycle is not dead. The early believers, they're getting their rewards. They're passing the torch. But once it's complete, once ownership is fragmented enough, that's when real adoption begins. So what should you do? Accumulate plenty. Hold your own keys and understand that boring Bitcoin is what we need to win.